Welcome back to Design Discord. I'm Alyssa Gerasimov.
And I'm Fernando Mastrangelo. And today we have my favorite person in the world, quite literally, and my beautiful wife, Mika Rosique.
The crowd goes wild.
Many of you probably don't know, but now you will know. But Mika and I have been working together for the last 7 years. She's the woman behind the magic, behind all the multi-million dollars of sales that we do at this studio every single year. She's the one selling, wheeling, dealing, getting those clients everything they need, all the specialty shit. Anyway, we're here and she's joining us to give us all of the insight that she has garnered for the last 7 years of hardcore sales. We're going to talk about sales today, people. We're going to get into what it takes to make millions of dollars of sales and how to treat clients and all of the crazy shit in between. All right. So
wow, what an intro.
It's going to be hard not to call you babe, but I'm going to try to call you Mika this whole time.
I was thinking the
same thing. I know.
Or Fern.
Or
which is what I call you as well.
Yeah. So welcome to Design Discord, Mika.
Thank you for having me. It's my first podcast interview ever, so that's exciting. Yeah.
Well, Alyssa, do you want to get it kicked off, or how should we do this? Because look, we want to keep it cash. Okay, we don't need to get crazy about this.
Well, I think a good place to start maybe would be, I'd love to, actually, I don't really know the answer to this question, like kind of how you guys ended up starting to work together and how Mika came on board and what that looked like from, the first days.
That's a good one.
It's a great question.
Okay,
go ahead.
So we had been dating for about 6 or 8 months. And I was working in digital media. I was the director of business development at a digital media farm called ZMG. I went to NYU Tisch for film and TV, so that was my background. And then I went right into short form content. And I was doing that for a while, but then being in Fernando's sphere with all of these artists and everybody doing exciting things, I got the confidence to quit and go freelance. And I was doing that for about 2 months until I decided, actually, I think I'm going to come in and do a bunch of content for Fernando Mastrangelo's studio. And so I came in and started doing YouTube content for the studio, social media, some press stuff. And that was primarily what I was doing for about a year, a very whirlwind year, because it was one of the years where the studio was doing so much in terms of travel, collaborations. It was like a content-heavy year. And then it was also the year that Fernando got a little burnt out because his career was at such a velocity, and it was had been at such a velocity for so many years that he was getting burnt out. And so after a year of doing that together, he was like, I think I want to retire and run away to Mexico. And I was like, okay, how do we do that without throwing the baby out with the bathwater? So I was like, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. I'm going to let Fernando semi-retire, and I'm going to try to manage kind of the back end in terms of employees, sales, all that kind of stuff. And
who
that's what I started doing.
Was there someone doing that at that time, or was Fernando,
Yes.
Were you handling it?
No. So for the first 5 or 6 years of my career, we worked with Chris Gadry was my sales director. And, essentially, Chris was going to kind of move on to doing his own personal kind of gallery / private sales, which he's still doing to this day. And Mika and another guy, Benjamin, ended up kind of taking over that role. And also because we were moving upstate, it kind of changed the whole dynamic of the studio. And then, by the way, COVID hit 3 months later. So, a lot of things were going on at that time. But yeah, essentially, she took over.
It's so crazy to me that you said 6 or 7 years, and then you say COVID, and it's like, oh, that was so long ago.
Yeah, it's
That's
crazy how
5 years
long.
That's
ago.
5 years
crazy.
ago now.
Yeah,
Well,
it's wild.
so when
And it's
she came in,
weird to be a studio director. I was telling Fernando this just the other day. There are so few people doing what Fernando is doing, being an independent artist or independent designer and trying to do everything in-house or without gallery representation. And so there are even fewer people that are basically the right-hand person to that artist. So
Mm.
there's not a lot of models to go off of, and it's a very unique position because you have to kind of go with what the artist wants their career, branding, or trajectory to look like at that time. So the 5 or so years since COVID have been the director role that I carry is very different than the one that was needed for the director role the first five years, you know?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and also the first 5 years when things were just going parabolic, there wasn't a lot of organization to the back end of the studio. Okay,
Mm.
so you know, it was like Chris would really answer all of the emails and he had the connections and the ties to the clients, but there wasn't like a system that we used like Salesforce or HubSpot or any of the, things that help organize that system. So it was like, trying to then decode that was kind of put
Mm.
onto Mika's plate where it was like, okay, let's start to create a system of organization. I think this probably happens to a lot of young designers, a lot of people at the beginning stages of their careers where it's like, okay, you have this you're starting to accumulate all these clients. Well, how do you stay in touch with them? How do you do follow-ups properly? How do you organize that? So maybe, Mika, you
Yeah,
could talk a
that's the
little bit about.
first thing that I
Yeah,
did. Literally the
right.
first thing when I was like, "Okay, this is on me." The emails are coming in. I did a very, like, rough Excel systems. If you know anything about systems, it's usually basically when you get an inquiry, a sales inquiry, you put in like points of data for it. Who is this person? What's the firm? What type of client are they? When did it come in? What were they asking for? As much data as you can get. So I just had that in Excel and it kept growing and being defined beyond that. And then in later years, I've actually gone back and forth with trying to make it a little bit more advanced with these CMS systems like HubSpot, Salesforce for like a quick second. Those are for much bigger, larger companies. Um, so I actually just have a really refined Excel that I'm able to use to harvest data from. And the reason you want to do that for two major reasons is because you don't want the sales director to leave and then all of the data was in their head and it's completely gone and you can't retain those relationships or look back at the history of those conversations. And two, to pull data from so that when the artist says something hyperbolic, like we never sell in Europe, you can be like, actually, we sold these times in Europe in these quarters. And I think we should run more ads there, do a fair there, or something like that. You can gain insights. And that's really like a second, I think it's really, I
Or for
wouldn't
example,
have,
if you guys are, Fernando has made new mirrors in a new colorway, you can go back and you can see everyone who's ever purchased a mirror or inquired about a mirror, right? And follow up with whatever new product is being released or other studio updates that are, specifically related to something you might have discussed with someone previously.
right. Or if he wants to make available works for a fair or some kind of show,
Mm.
we can look back and we can be like, Glacier is really hot right now, or Aurora is really hot. And people typically buy
Mm.
in these sizes. So this is what I would do, which is smart for inventory. Um, all that to
No,
say,
yeah,
like this,
I wanna dig into that a little bit then because it's pretty good insight. Like, what ends up happening, especially with design, is that you have hot items, hot products, right? Hot colorways.
Mm.
And it's not that you wanna, like, just be producing those hot items, but it does help you organize yourself if you're going to do an exhibition in a new country or somewhere, right?
Hmm.
So let's say we went to Dubai. Well, the first time I went to Dubai, I made new works, okay? Which maybe was a mistake, but maybe wasn't. But it was just kind of it ended up not being a mistake. But if I do a fair today in a place that we've never been to, like last year we did Aspen, we quite literally dug into our archive and said, okay, these are the best-selling mirrors. These are the products that do really well. Since I'm introducing myself to this market, let me put the bangers up. Okay. And that's what, Mika's been able to kind of organize that and say, okay, literally down to the size. We've sold great at 54 inches. Okay. Even though it sounds really calculated, but to really hit sales, you need to be this calculated at times. And so that's been something that, like, before I was like, I think that's a good one because I feel like
It
I've
was
made a
just a
lot of those.
vibe.
Yeah, it was just like I feel like I've made a lot of those, so that's popular. No, it's not, you don't want to rely on that. And a lot of this may sound kind of basic, but I'm 10 years in the game or more, and we're really just organizing ourselves around this stuff. So
Yeah,
I
I
would,
think it comes
yeah,
in 3 stages, and I wouldn't like, if you're a younger designer or artist out there, I wouldn't beat yourself up if you haven't started doing it yet, because I really think that at first you just, like, hit the ground running, and you put a lot out there, and you like throwing spaghetti against the wall, and then you start getting some traction and some sales, and you wanna fill them really quickly, and then you get a team, and then they just start at first, everything's running, but then they start to accumulate the data. And then the whole third stage, which you don't even get to right away, is how does that data inform further strategy? So
Hmm.
there was a whole, I would say, like 2 years where at this Excel document, though thousands of inquiries long, was just for me. And I was like, I will use this someday, I swear. And then it started to be something that could inform,
Hmm.
like, where do we want to do ads? Where do we want to.
But I feel like there's
Yeah.
also kind of a counter argument to that, which is I can imagine that, let's say you're a young designer, you're getting, some inquiries, but you're actually not converting those inquiries to sales and actually starting to understand, okay, people are inquiring these questions about this piece, but the sales don't come through. Like, why is that? What are the questions that people are asking? Is it a price, issue?
that's
Is
a
it a
great,
customization
yeah,
issue? And I think that
yep.
even sort of it feels like it can also, I don't know, it depends obviously on like how those interactions are going and how your business is going, but I do think that even from like day one there is a lot of value in that data and in starting to understand what is going on when someone reaches out to you.
Yeah, the more granular you can get, the better. I wanted to know where they came from, why they fell off, um, and just broad strokes that I think also when you write that data or input that data a lot, you learn it again. So when you got a lot going on, it doesn't just go out of your head. If you're actually putting it into like cells, you kind of can start pulling themes without a true data report. So I started to just notice very early on that a lot of the clients were repeat clients. So they were repeat relationships. And that's where I was like, okay, my top priority has to be
Mm.
fostering these relationships very closely because we are a repeat client business. Um, so that informed that strategy very quickly. And then that brought on what I think is like the second biggest thing that I brought after my Excel sheet, which was really securing a like client voice that we
Mm,
had.
huge,
Mhm.
hugely important.
Yeah,
Well,
which
okay, let me speak on that a little bit before you jump in because
sure.
from the get-go, when Chris and I were figuring out how to do sales for the studio, my main priority was that we respond to everything and everybody in a very time efficient manner,
Mhm.
and that we treat them with the utmost pleasantries and like make them feel special from beginning to end. I don't care if they're buying a drum or they're buying $150,000 wall piece. It's you treat them all with the same amount of respect. And so there was an ethos that I had already kind of started. And then when Mika came in, she like really took it to the next level where today you can talk about it.
Yeah, I think we're both cut from the same cloth like that. And I think that in the art world, it's very rare. In the design industry, they're much more friendly. But I remember early on that anybody that came into Fernando's studio, if he had the time, he would himself give them a tour, no matter who they were. And even if they weren't buyers, they were just fans or somebody who was interested. And so that kind of openness translated. And then I took it to the sales side where anybody who reaches out, I want to help get them information. And also my favorite thing to do, which I learned from this book, which I think that anybody in sales or startups or small businesses should read, which is The Red Velvet Rope Economy. I think that's what it's called. It's like a book I read early on.
The Velvet Rope Economy, I think it's called.
Yeah.
I read it
And
too. It's amazing.
yeah, it's about when you're catering, like your clients are the top 1%, or you have a high level of, your client has a high level of expectations of your service or your product. And one of the things that they do kind of in the hospitality as well that we do is look for ways to be like a fairy godmother, look for ways to pull things off that they didn't expect. You know, if they have an impossible deadline, rather than be like, right away, that's going to be too hard, I will make it like a fun challenge to see if I can rearrange things to make this impossible deadline happen, because then they'll really remember you and that will really resonate. And in a repeat client business, that's a big deal.
I mean, to touch on that book a little bit, the book essentially, when you are dealing with the top 1% of the 1%, really read the people that have interior designers, that have art consultants. They're not used to having any unease or anything that's hard. They're not. They're when they arrive at a restaurant, they're let right in. They don't have to wait on lines. So then that translates to how they like to buy. When you go to buy a beautiful watch or a mansion or whatever you're purchasing, you're going to get a certain level of treatment. So that treatment, they're coming to us to then have that treatment as well. When they're buying a luxury item of furniture that's handmade and handcrafted by an artist, we want to give them that experience that they're used to and that they're paying for. You know what I mean? Like, who wants to be treated like crap meanwhile they're buying something that's really expensive? And then also imagine that if they have a great experience with the purchase, right? Everything's fluid. The shipping, we'll talk about shipping in a little while. Like, if they don't have to think about anything, and then the piece arrives at their home, it gets beautifully installed, the crate gets taken away, and they just feel happy with that experience. Dude,
Mm.
they're gonna talk to their friends about it. When their friends come by and they see the beautiful piece on the wall, they're gonna say, "Oh, and you know what? That studio was so easy to work with, so fun, and it made everything feel so fluid." That goes such a long way.
Mm.
So really consider how you treat your clients, because I think it's really the basis of how, and because we have repeat, well, we wouldn't have a repeat client list or clients if we didn't treat them that way. And it's also, by the way, my philosophy in life. Yes, Mika said earlier, when people would come to my studio, I don't care if you're a RISD kid or if you're a high schooler or you're a billionaire collector. I'm going to walk you through my studio and I'm going to show you what my practice is about. I'm going to talk to you about the little idiosyncratic things, and I'm going to be open. Why? Because that's just how I am as a human. But also, it's something that you have to start to build in yourself as a person that sells work, that sells, a product, because you're really selling the experience of buying your work. And so imagine how you would want to be treated under those circumstances. That's how I always think about it. How do I want to be treated when I'm paying for a $1,000 a night hotel? Not that we do very often, but if we do, how do we want to be treated? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So,
Well, I think it's interesting. So I learned a fun fact about the way that you communicate with your clients recently through Jen, I think. Jen was talking to, I think, Fernando, when she was talking to you, that you guys apply this mindset to even really small details, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you always refer to someone buying your work as an acquisition, right? Rather than, and like, I think I'd be,
that's right.
can you speak maybe, Mika, a little bit more about that and kind of how you've developed, certain like syntax or vocabulary?
Well, Fernando was originally coming from the art world, and I think that early on in his
Mm.
career, that is what set him apart. And he's always looked to the art world as the compass for how we should behave with clients, with pricing, with marketing. Not that we do a lot of marketing, but with everything, we should look at art world models,
Mm.
sometimes even fashion models, but not so much design or fine furniture. And I think that that also relates to the language that we have used and adopted.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, I have based a lot of it on art world syntax, as you say. So, and it's because we are selling the work as art mostly. When Mika talks to clients, we wouldn't use like the word product or anything like that. We don't want to reference it that way, and maybe that's fine for other designers. But if you're in a
Mm.
collectible, you wanna
Well,
kind
I
of,
think it's
yeah,
interesting. I've
say,
actually been learning a lot about sort of strategies, the impact of strategies like this. Like, I don't remember what I was reading exactly, or I think a podcast I was listening to, and it was a young entrepreneur that said that, like 6 months in to building her company, she created another email account and made it be like her assistant, even though it was still her. And this way of even like presenting yourself like through digital communication in a way that makes you feel more professional, more polished, more, at another level, that even like over email people see people on, like interpret you in a different way. And I just think it's interesting to also think about the way that like reflects through the language that you guys are using. Like I wonder if if you're buying a mirror and you're communicating with a few different people getting pricing on mirrors, and then you guys refer it to as like an acquisition versus someone else refers it to as a mirror. It's like, oh, why is this language, what does that mean? Like, is this piece actually like seen as an investment and that one is just a product?
You know what I would also say on this is I feel like it just brought up, it reminded me as I've coached a lot of different salespeople under me over the years. And one of the things I teach them when I'm trying to teach them how to answer emails and talk to clients is more so than sticking to a specific syntax or whatever, is to match the client, be adaptable. Because there's a lot of that's just what's worked for me. My background is not in sales, but I've found that the greatest strength is adaptability. So instead of having like a certain specific voice, I will match the client. If
Mm,
I get a client who is very chill and they're giving me like, yo, what's the price? Where's it at? They're very like sent from my phone. I'm not going to be very formal with
yeah.
them because that's a disconnect. We're not, I'm going to meet them right in that energy. If they want to be very friendly and put a bunch of emojis, you got emoji back. If they're like from
Hmm.
Europe or a lot of Asian clients, they're very formal with their emails. They do dear, sincerely. I match that as well. So
Uh-huh.
that I would say trumps everything when you're talking to somebody because they want to feel like you're their friend and
hmm
you're meeting them where they're at.
Totally. So tell me a little bit about, I kind of how many inquiries you guys get, like
Oh my God.
weekly, monthly, what percent, what are the most like common questions that people are asking? What percentage of those inquiries ends up actually going to sale?
Great question.
Yeah, I'd love to know about all of that.
Well,
It's gonna sound crazy, actually. It's good because
it's
I
a
know the
small
number, and
percentage.
it's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
5% go turn to
Yeah.
sales.
Yeah, it's
But
because we also get a lot of people who might not understand because Fernando has a very strong social reach. And
Mm.
he's got like getting a lot of interest and engagement from social at all times. There are people who don't really understand the price point at first, and so you get a lot of empty, I call them empty inquiries, which we treat with the same response. We just, you get some ghosting.
Nice.
Um,
Have you ever
but
thought about like having any more transparency on pricing online in order
Yeah,
to
of
limit
course.
those requests?
We have this is something that I've struggled with for many, many years because I love the idea of full transparency as a studio, as a marketplace. I think a lot of the problems in the art world come from its lack of transparency. And I thought for a long time I was like, we're gonna put the prices right on the website. I don't care. And then s-
Mika, sales
yeah.
usually stops it. So,
Yes,
um,
because go ahead. You explain why. Because for me, I was like, hey, if it's 35,000, it's 35,000, and people need to know that, because I just thought it would just be better because then people who are inquiring, it would drop our empty inquiries or, a lot of this ghosting because people would just be like, oh, okay, that's the price range. Get it. But something happens when you do that. That go ahead. Do you want to explain?
well, it would be another thing that puts us as one of those studios that is doing things that nobody else is, which is always a little bit scary, because nobody else is doing it for a reason. And the reason usually other people aren't doing it is because it's like the art world. It's still a lot of backroom stuff of, different long-term clients have different discounts or situations that they have. And then also, you want to make sure that you get them to reach out in the first place and not be able to have all the
Yeah.
information right away so that you can further develop a relationship, see how to make it work for them, and foster that. So, even I would rather retain or siphon through some empty inquiries just so that I can get everybody who's getting interest. And then I can decide
Mm.
on my side how I use them. Do I want to put them on the newsletter? Do I want to siphon them over to, an Instagram group? Do I want to make them available
Yeah.
to a back room of available works? How
You
do I want to invite them
basically
to a dinner, etc.?
Right. You
Yeah.
never wanna completely eliminate the conversations that you can engage with. Because also, like, let's say that something's a little bit out of their price range. Um, but if we learn what their price range is, we can
Hmm.
then make an offer for something else, right? And maybe that wouldn't have happened if they go right onto the website and they see 35,000 and they don't realize that it could be customized or that we may have an inventory piece that we could give for a discount.
Uh-huh.
And then you keep that person engaged. And I've had people, by the way, like there was this guy that loved my coffee cast coffee table and saved up. And he saved up for it based on a price I had given him in like 2014 and came
Right.
back to us almost 10 years later and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about this coffee table forever. I now have the." I'll tell you, it was we had priced it at 16,000 at that time. Today, that would not be a realistic price for us. But the
That's
fact that
so touching. That's
I know.
so
wait,
touching.
the fact that he came back to us, I said, "I'll do the deal. I'll do
Mm.
the deal."
Mhm.
Because when somebody spends that whole time doing
For
it
10 years, he thought about it.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
yeah,
if he would have seen that price of double, maybe he wouldn't have reached out at all.
that's
yeah.
right.
He probably would have been so disappointed.
Yeah. I and
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I mean, so you never want to eliminate the potential of keeping someone there because, by the way, they grow, their wealth grows, their
Yeah.
families grow, their houses grow, things happen and change in their lives, and they come back to you. And so, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
And
good to
I
try to harness as many people
and
as
I'd
Yeah.
possible.
always rather absorb any of the problems rather than have them be barriers of entry for the client. So if it's more work for us internally to deal with, that's always the choice over the client having to
Mm.
do some kind of work, you know?
So back to her question, although, so how many inquiries do you think you field? I don't even know sometimes. I just know that you're constant. It's just a constant.
Well, it's every
This is
day.
what it's every. I
You
know it's
know,
every.
it's every
So this
day.
is right,
And
but this is
they
what happens. So the inquiry, the way that I see sales, okay, is that Mika's constantly talking to different clients, and then on our daily meetings, or sometimes not maybe 2 or 3 times a week, we'll sit down and we'll have a very formal meeting. In the morning, "Okay, Fern, I need an answer on this. Client's looking for that. Is this possible? Blah, 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 blah. I need a sketch for this. I need a render for that. Can this be done?" Touches base with fabricators, okay, she's kind of out there, and then I don't hear about them for, like, sometimes months, sometimes a year, sometimes longer. And then sometimes she'll be like, "Okay, remember that drawing you made, like, last year? Okay, that finally came through." I was like, "I don't even remember it." "Okay, cool, that's the okay." So, it's like that. And then but that's the flow that I see. Maybe you could talk a bit about the flow that you see.
well, that for sure. Um, it's about 5 to 10 a day, I would say, and it goes in waves. So, it seems like because we have a lot of interior designers who are buying for their clients' homes, we have about, I would say, like 10% direct collectors, and the rest are art consultants, interior designers, um, and they all seem to be doing their projects at the same time. So they are purchasing at the same time at quarters. They
Mhm.
are, doing their art selections and their presentations to their clients all at the same time. And so in cycles, everybody will want to put down a deposit in the same week, which is sometimes
So is that
annoying for
seasonal? Is
this
it like, New Year's, new school year, or
beginning of the
what's the
year, end of the year, biggest times.
mm.
Beginning of the year, end of the year. Um, I think the end of the year, I think it's because people wanna get money out at the end of the year, and then at the beginning of the year, they also have an influx and they wanna get projects started right away. And then the deadest part would be summer because our industry is on vacation. So the design industry takes all of August off. So
Mm.
if even if clients are asking about something, those designers are on a boat somewhere. They are not answering their emails.
You'll also
Um,
find around okay, just think about the normal cycle of human life, okay?
yeah.
If you're hosting Thanksgiving dinner, if you're hosting your family for Christmas, right? These are times where you're trying to button up the little bits of your home and get the final pieces and get the art hung, get everything done for those events. Okay. So like pre-summer, so you'll see like right now there's stuff
Mhm.
happening
Yeah.
because people want to have their homes ready for the summer that they're going to go to in the Hamptons or wherever. And so they're finishing up those projects. So you'll see a little bit of a rush right before because they'll put not all projects, but you'll see somewhat some trends with that, with people trying to like, that's why August is dead because it's like, well, everyone's enjoying their summer home at that time, at that
Yeah.
time, so you're not really
I would
selling a
say
lot at
yeah.
that moment.
I
You
would
know,
say beginning of the year, end of the year, all of the top of the quarters are really heavy rather than the ends of the quarters. Um, and also I would say a cyclical connection between the design industry is also with the real estate industry. So
mhm.
when people are buying homes, obviously the inbox is very, very loud. When people are doing their renovations and stuff like that, when they feel that they can do those things, we are right in tandem with that.
Yeah. we only started to realize that trend recently because during COVID, everything spiked. It was just madness, right? But
Yeah.
homes were being traded high by, interest rates were low. So it was like, shit was bonkers. Now, as the real estate market has cooled, although for luxury market, from what I keep up with the real estate market, it hasn't cooled as much, but certainly they're not renovating at the same rate. And I'd be curious, and I know the design world wants to keep their cards really close, but I bet on the interior design side, they have definitely seen a slowdown. There's just no way because it's just the quantity in which we're trading these assets is just not happening at the same rate. And so, and everyone did renovate heavily during COVID, which then creates a little bit of a lag. Um, you know, we weren't sure if it was going to decimate us or if it was, I'm always interested in cycles. Okay. And I'm fortunate in a place in my career where we've survived every cycle. Okay. So I know now that nothing is going to really stop this from continuing to make a good income and stuff like that. But I always was kind of worried about it. I was like, oh, damn, like if a big real estate recession comes, are we decimated? Well, you know, for our part of the industry, where we're selling to the top 1%, we have not seen a big dip. We have seen a dip, of course, from the highs of COVID, but we don't see a dip overall where it's like, uh-oh, there's no inquiries coming in. There are some dry spells, but
I would say
overall,
August.
August.
August. August
December gets
and
quiet. December at the end
that's what I was gonna
because
say. With the
yeah.
between Christmas and New Year's, also that's the only time that nobody expects us to answer, which is a
Yeah.
breath of fresh
Yeah.
air for a second.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, yeah, go
So
ahead.
when people reach out, what is one of the first questions that people ask about price? Or what are the
Yeah,
first
what's
questions that you're
yeah.
usually fielding?
Well, if it's trade in the industry, they're very to the point, lead time, trade price, very matter of fact. And then if it's anybody else, they'll ask a broad, is this for sale? Is this available? Can it be shipped to Singapore, Dubai, something, you know? And I give the information readily to both of them. If it's a real person, not trade, I won't inundate them with extra information. I try to eliminate bogging them down. So I'm not going to give them a tear sheet right away or be like, this is the production lead time, this is shipping lead times, and give me your destination address so that I can liaison with the shipping agents about. I'm not going to treat them like that. Just going to be like, yes,
Yeah.
this is available. It is listed at this price. If you'd like to learn more about acquisition, please let me know and I can assist you further. And then we go from there. If it's trade, exactly the opposite. I'm going to give them all the information that they want because I know they might have a presentation that same day. They might be still sourcing things and I want to get them not sourcing other things quickly. So I want to make sure they have all of the information very readily. And I'll even add, like, if you want a material sample, if you want a render, please let us know because we can assist in those areas. I just want to be super helpful to them to be able to sell on their part. And then you're kind of in cahoots with them too, because you're like, I could also send you a material sample if you think that would help your presentation. Let me know. I can make it work. And they're like, oh, that would be such a good idea. And then you're like, great, I'll just messenger it over. And then they want to do right by you because they're like, they're very helpful. We love this piece. Let's make it happen. And then you're like, good luck on the presentation. Can't wait to hear how it goes. You're together in it. And you do feel together in it authentically. They have the same clients as we do.
Oh my God,
They
yeah,
feel like teammates.
yeah. We've had inquiries that go on for months and months and months into years sometimes, inquiries where and then sometimes the project completely dissipates. But our attention to those things even if it's 2 days or 2 years, it remains the same. And we constantly, and Mika will have a follow-up schedule. I know that you
Mhm.
have a follow-up schedule, and also I think HubSpot helps with that, and
Yeah.
the way you do
I
it
do
on
it on
Excel.
Excel now,
Okay.
but HubSpot does all of the CMSs do it, and you have your line item that is that inquiry, and you set the follow-up date, and it'll ping you. And so I just do that on a standard calendar now. But I also don't follow up if it's somebody that I have a significant relationship with. Like if it's in Grau, I'm
Mm.
not going to bother them because if they ask, it's pretty serious because
Yeah.
they are a long-term client. So if they ask, I'm almost like, that's pretty set.
That's pretty set.
They're
Yeah, you
asking
can.
because they're wanting an invoice.
And that's something
Um,
really important to note. Once you have passed the test several times with these clients, once you've done so many works for them, there's no longer a question of price. They kind of know what to expect from you. Okay, it's just like you when you go to your favorite place to shop. It's not like if wherever you go from wherever 21 to Marnie, right? You know what to expect price wise. Okay, so they know what to expect. They kind of know the range. They kind of know the range of the client. So you kind of know those sales are kind of secured, or at least like the client says yes, it's a go. It's not. Because I think at the beginning, you have a lot of hesitation because of price, right? Price is so scary. Price is scary because you're putting your value out there. And we're speaking from the upper end of the high end of design here. So I want to be able to also, because I don't want this to not make sense for people that are trying to sell a $5,000 table. Okay. I
mhm.
want them, because it is a little bit different, right? Like we
It's
talk about,
totally different.
it's totally different.
A
Like
totally different beast.
we
For
we we
example,
have clients that will not really question shipping prices. Sometimes they do, but we try to get them the best. But they also want white glove, right? So then they got to understand that white glove is a big deal. So anyway, but if you're selling a $5,000 table and it costs $2,000 to ship, there could be some friction there,
Mm.
right? Because it's like, $2,000 to get it to me. It's like, shit. Okay. So,
Yeah.
so I want this to also be able to make sense for people that are starting out and saying, okay, well, I have a piece that's 5,000.
that's a good point because
Yeah.
I will also say to people who are selling in the 5,000 and under range, if I'm using my experience with Fernando Mastrangelo Studio, those are my longest, most tedious sales to close.
Hmm.
Meaning our entry level is now 6,000 for the side table list. But even when I was 5,000 a few years ago, it's always been the email threads that are 60 emails long, deep, which you're like, how
Yeah.
could that possibly be? I know, how could it possibly be? But the side tables, they want the most samples. They
Hmm.
want to customize the color ever so slightly.
Hmm.
They were really they really want to understand the functionality of it, how they can use it. Do they
Hmm.
need a glass top? They ask the most questions about something that's around $5,000. And the higher it goes, the less emails I will get. The higher it goes, it's usually 1 or 2 emails. What's the price? Okay, I'm wiring it full, not
Yeah.
50%.
Why do you think that is?
We've
We've
wondered
talked
about
about
this
it. Yeah.
often. Well, because a lot of people that are buying their one sort of aspirational piece, right? At the $5,000 range or $6,000 range,
Mm.
it's a big deal purchase for them, right? Because it is that one. They're like, okay, I want to get that really special side table from this studio, and if we are that studio, it's like, okay, we're and we want it to be just right because other people that are other people that are more casual, they're buying like 20 different side tables for their project. They're not going to question it, right? But the ones that are in that price range that are like kind of wanting that special one-off piece, they dig it. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I think that also the higher you get in price point, the more it seems like a piece of art that you are acquiring.
Hmm.
Why would you talk to them about what the colorway is going to be or what,
Right.
you would just pay for it and receive it, and you wouldn't be as concerned about how long it's going to take the artist to accomplish it and what materials they're going to use. You're just confident because you're paying a high level price because you feel like it is art.
Do you think clients who are purchasing pieces, let's say like at that top higher tier range, like 20,000, 30,000 and up, like are there do you think they have budgets that are just like
Enormous.
unrestricted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they don't, they're not concerned whether the mirror is 5,000 or 30,000.
Exactly.
No,
To
they
them,
are
they
actually
just
they are
yeah.
concerned if it's 5,000 or 50,000. In
Right. They don't
fact,
want it to be lower.
they don't want it to be low.
They don't want yeah.
Yeah.
Like for example, for my mom's job, she always tells me that because she works like, with these kinds of people too, is like one of the most common questions that her client will ask an interior designer is like, how unique is this? Like, I only want something if it is one of a kind. And it's like price is not a question. Like, what is a question is the like
That's right.
one of a kindness of it.
I'll give you a little anecdote that's really funny. I always talk about. I had this big time collector come to the studio, and I had this massive 80-inch mirror on one of my tables, or it was upright, but it was like on a slanted table. And I'll never forget. She was like decked out, Hermes, whatever, And she comes in and she goes, "Oh, I love this one." And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "How much is this one?" And I said 80. And she goes, 80. Yeah, I said 80. And she goes, "I'm sorry?" I said 80. And she goes, "Oh, thank goodness." She goes, "I thought you said 18. And I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "Yeah." I mean, it was just so funny because it was like she couldn't fathom such a large scale piece having been so inexpensive. And so it was to me it was funny, but it was also very it was always it was a lesson that and look, guys, like I don't want to come off as like, yeah, we're selling shit for $80,000. I mean, look, you guys are not everyone listening to this is going to be in those price ranges, but these are psychological things that if you want to play in the market, you need to kind of think about. You need to understand, like,
I think it can be applied to at any scale where if
correct.
you are undervaluing yourself and your work, like it is also a question of if this piece is handmade, if you are an incredible craftsperson, you should have recognized your own value so that people recognize it too.
Amen,
And if you have
sister.
made, like, if you have handcrafted cut all the dovetails of this cabinet and you're trying to sell it for $500, like, people are going to be like confused why that price is on that piece when it's clear that, like, those girls,
That's what I
that
was
we saw at
thinking, too.
Design Week.
Oh yeah,
The ones
Those
who
marble
said
side
that.
tables.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. The problem is that most people are thinking, well, like, listen, dude, I don't have any sales. So if I drop my prices, maybe I'll start to get sales.
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that. There's like a internal feeling that that's true. But I'm more on what you're saying, Alyssa. I'm like, you need to value yourself correctly. When I started in the game, I came from sculpture, so I just priced what my sculptures would be at that scale and at that complexity. So when my first console that I ever made, we priced at 18,000. And well, that's what I would have charged for a sculpture of mine at that scale. And so I didn't have context whether 18,000 was a lot of money in the design world or not. I just was like, well, that's what that thing costs. And then people honored that price. And then when I saw that they honored that price, I was like, well, right, but this is what I valued it at. And so you have to keep that in mind. I think that's a really important point that I think people should recognize is that,
Yeah.
look, if you're trying to play in the $5,000 range, okay. But if your work is more valuable than that in your mind, or your craft, like you're saying, like you fucking put your heart and soul into it. There's more value in that. And remember,
But also, I mean, you could
oh,
be playing in the $5,000 range and still, have a very finely crafted piece. But I even think that people struggle to move work at that price point. And I think that at that price point, it's like you should, again, like you shouldn't necessarily be lowering your prices. Maybe it's how you're communicating about your process, about your work, about,
oh, I'm so glad
doing,
you're
if you're
saying this. Yes.
new on the scene, about like you have to be doing active outreach and like, I don't know, finding those repeat clients rather than just saying, oh, people aren't, coming to me because my prices are too high. And I think that there's like usually a different issue underlying.
Can I jump in on this, because you're bringing up such an important point. There's something I had actually wanted to talk about on here, is that, okay, everything is brand. Okay. I don't love to like reduce everything to brand, but unfortunately that is the commercial world that we live in. So, and brand, what I mean by brand is not just like the way your logo looks and no. You, the
Mm-hmm.
maker. Okay, when people visit me, when people see me, they see an artist. I present as an artist. I am an artist, right? So I live the artist life. I wear the clothes that are, no, I'm not even joking. I know you're laughing. Look, there's some serious truth to this. You need to
Yeah.
learn to be the thing,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of artists that decide to, wear crappy clothes, and then they wear that crappy clothes out to events, that doesn't really signal success, or doesn't signal like you look sloppy. And if sloppy is your brand, okay, but look at other successful artists, how they dress, how they behave, how they speak, how they present themselves to the world, how they brand themselves, because you become
Mm-hmm.
an extension of that brand, right? Like, the way your studio looks, the presentation that you're giving, right? Like, it's all that is how you start to increase the value of your work, right? So, it's something that I don't think a lot of people think about, but it's extraordinarily crucial. And if you look deeply at successful artists and designers, they all present in a certain way that exudes the thing that they are. So if you're like a whimsical, crafty art furniture maker, well, maybe you dress whimsical and crafty. You know what I mean? Like, wear the bright shoes and the weird cut up shirts and the like, do the thing that matches the level of sophistication or the level of whimsy that your work exudes. Like, you need to fully brand your, and maybe that sounds like, oh, it seems so fake to do that. It's not fake. Okay, because if I walk into Audemars Piguet or Rolex, let's say, because maybe not everyone knows what APs are. Okay, if I walk into Rolex, how about buying a luxury watch, right? Do I want the person presenting to me, my salesperson, to look sophisticated, look like Rolex, so exude the idea of Rolex? Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
do. I don't want to
Right,
walk
because
in
if
and
you
have
walk
like,
into a shop that they're pawning it or something in there, you're gonna want a better price. If you
yeah, I
walk
mean,
into a shop, yeah, like
well,
in
also if you
Chinatown or
walk
Yeah, it's
into,
something.
interesting. I mean, I don't, it's an interesting parallel to the fashion world because I don't really go into, I don't go into like luxury brand boutiques that often, but I did recently when I was in London and I was like, this is an amazing experience. Like all
exactly.
of these people are like here to help me. And we were not actually even there. We were there to look at, like, I was with a friend and her friend did like a marketing campaign for Celine, and we were there to like look at these graphics that were in the Celine store in London. And so we were not even, but I was like so impressed with the level of service that we got. Do you want a drink? Do you want to see this exclusive collection? But it is an interesting thing where, like, of course, I do not right now have any budget to buy anything from Celine, but like, would I maybe consider it in the future because I had this amazing experience? Maybe.
Dude,
Totally.
that's absolutely
What
totally right. We talk about
When
this all
we
the
were
time.
talking about having a gallery, we were like, we want to hire people from the fashion world. We want to hire people who worked at Tom Brown stores. Because
Hmm.
when we go into Tom Brown stores, we love how they treat us, you know? And that's the kind of
Mm.
vibe that we would want our gallery to have.
And what she means by that is that, because I don't want to be like, oh, we buy from Tom. We have bought from Tom Brown. Okay, we love Tom Brown, but there's a certain thing that when you walk into Tom Brown, they love the clothes. They are passionate about the way that this
Mhm.
is sewn, and the embroidery here, and and the way it feels, and they talk to you about it like it's like you're a passionate connoisseur of clothing. And so we want to exude that same thing, right? When you come to buy a Fernando Mastrangelo piece, we want you to become a connoisseur of what it's about. We want to teach you. They want to be like, yeah, this is made of these materials and this transformation and this thing that's happened, right?
Mm.
We want to express that to them so they can then become passionate about it, right? And so that's what they do at Tom Brown, and we're like, that's the right attitude for selling,
Yeah.
this type of thing. Yes.
I mean, it's even interesting. So I'm gonna like slightly derail this conversation,
Okay.
but we're gonna bring it back.
Okay.
It's like actually a lot of what Jen and I talk about is like what is the experience of being on the future area, and what can area as a platform offer that like Restoration Hardware cannot offer insight into how their work is produced because their work is produced in a large factory elsewhere. But you can, as a buyer, become a connoisseur of your work, of
Mhm.
any other maker's work, understand who they are as a person, understand their process, their history, where their concepts come from, and like talking about how to translate, like, how is it possible to translate that like one-on-one luxury experience like through a digital space. And it's like, no, it feels to me like
Mhm.
there's such a missed opportunity in how to build that deeper connection with an independent maker in studio. And even like through this conversation, I'm thinking about, well, what does it look like if we offer some sort of consultation service? And especially like at the beginning to kind of break that barrier of entry, is there a call that you take with me, with whoever else, we can bring on? And
Mhm.
I'm actually there, like digging into the weeds, telling the story of these objects in order to start building those relationships. Anyway, that's
I
my
mean,
tangent.
first of all,
That sounds so exciting.
that's right.
Yeah.
That is exciting
Because if you can
because
bring the intimacy and the
Mhm.
authenticity
Mhm.
of being in a place where you're super passionate about the work into a digital space that translates. Wow. Because I'm trying to think of
Mhm.
examples when you say that. And the first thing that popped into my head was Glossier because
Mm.
they do have a brand authenticity and like club vibe where you feel like when you're on the digital spaces that does translate, but they're also mass produced, so they lose the intimacy aspect. So, yeah, if you could pull that off, that would be
I
very
mean,
Interesting.
exciting.
that is that'd be crucial. I mean, we've tried to do this with our website where there's video content, there's explanations of things. There's, you know, it's adding a little extra deep layer. Yeah, if you can basically recreate the best studio tour ever, and then make it online so people feel engaged that same way. Um, yeah, that's important. So yeah, it's sales are everything. Sales are obviously everything. A lot of the artists that end up, um, showing with galleries, they don't have to do this as much. But if you're in this game of trying to sell your own work or start to work with showrooms, these are the things that you need to think about or consider. If as you're building your brand, the more and more people I speak to, they want to be doing it as independents. Okay, because the showroom model never allows them to focus on each individual artist, right? Someone walks into a showroom, their attentions are going to go where their attention is going to go, right? And if you're on the other side of that, you're the artist, right? You've produced your works, you're now showing at a showroom. Well, how do you get the client to engage with your piece? Like we just talked to Suju the other day. She was here in town, and she makes these beautiful mirrors, and she just started showing them with 27, the famous beautiful
Mm.
showroom. But now she's in a showroom with a lot of different designers. How do you garner that? How do you bring them in? And
I think that I think that there's still value. I think that's like one stream that's like I don't really actually see that there's, necessarily the perspective that you're talking about actually. What I think about more is what information is the maker losing through passing off like all of that responsibility onto a showroom. In terms
exactly.
of you don't know what kinds of questions people are asking about your work.
That's
You
right.
don't understand who those people are. You don't get that direct contact. And so what amount of, like, apart from the fact that you're already foregoing probably 30 to 50% commission to that showroom, but you are actually also losing more than that. Like you are losing critical data points.
Totally.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's totally valid to have your work in a showroom. Potentially, like a client can go see the piece in person.
Mhm.
But I just think that it's important for makers to also critically evaluate like what's being lost through those relationships apart from just financial.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, with Mika and I mean, we're able to really control those narratives and control the experience of buying a work from the studio. Right, like if you have a showroom attendant or an assistant there that has had a bad day, or that is not feeling passionate about your particular work, right? Like I'm sure every showroom's like, oh no, everyone's passionate about every single thing. But come on, we know the reality here. You know what I mean? Like and by the way, this is what happens. Like, think about it. You're on the side of sales. Okay. Someone walks in, they're going to get drawn to something. You want to create a sale, right? So for me to then walk you over to maybe someone else and start to educate you on that stuff and try to sell you on that, that's tough. You
Mm.
want, because you're motivated by your incentive. Your incentive is to sell something and get a commission, and you want to please, and so the client, and so, you know. But these are, this is why I'm always advocating for independence, blah 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 blah. But I also think that it's, not everyone can sell themselves either that well. So these are the complex questions of the way that the industry is going to evolve in the next few years, or in the next decade or so. We'll see. Um, if there's
And I
more
will
independence,
say
or yeah.
something that's unique about our dynamic, but I think that I should bring it up because Suju brought it up to me the other day. I was telling her I was going to be on the podcast, and she was like, "Oh, that's so great that people can see your dynamic because it's so important." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't really understand why." And she was like, "It's something that a lot of people in the industry, our specific industry, it happens where couples will own the business together and will, maybe one is specifically the artist and one runs the business, or maybe they're both in everything together. But it really is something that you can learn together, and it feeds off of each other really well. So we're big proponents of that. I would say if anybody is thinking about it, they should definitely try it because it can be really rewarding and it can really help the business grow.
Yeah, and we found that it's really nice for our relationship to be able to also, well, by the way, we've created a lot of boundaries. We don't talk about work all the time. I think that's something that if you are a couple that is trying to run a business together, you need to create boundaries and respect those boundaries and say, okay, like when we first started dating, Mika didn't really know the complexities of what my day-to-day life were like at the studio, because we would just hang out on the weekends, and I would be focused on us and not on, oh my God, that client and all this piece, and then on Monday I got to do. No, I emptied myself, and we met when I was 39. I was a bit more mature by then. I had already been in the game a long time. So, but things you need to keep in mind is when you're working with each other is, hey, respect the boundaries. Don't make it all about work. Still enjoy each other outside of that. Um, and also the benefits are like, well, you get to take time off together. It's really nice, right? You get to work towards goals together, and say, okay, when we achieve this, we get to do that. Okay, so we just bought this new studio which was the biggest purchase of our entire lives together, and we dedicated ourselves to doing that, and then we achieved goals together, and it just feels really good. And not to turn this into a love podcast, but like, those are important tenets of a strong relationship, is to grow together, have goals together, and to not have these kind of like separate lives where you both come and just complain about your days together. No, it's like, no, you want to have a healthy life where, your partner and you are in the game together. There's no better game than to be with someone else in life, trying to achieve things mutually and getting there, I think. Yeah.
And I think it just makes sense when one is an artist. I think that if you were not the life partner of that artist, the job would be a lot harder. Because if I'm just the studio director, I would probably want to stick to a more rigid thing long term. If we develop a certain system, a certain pricing structure, a certain way, like, oh, we're just going to do fairs these years, and then I can like lock in and focus on that. That's what a standard studio director who has no relation would say. But if you're the life partner, you can have a little bit more patience and massage room with the artist to develop, because Fernando has gone through many phases where he's wanted to not do the fairs, or he's wanted to sometimes say no to a lot of things, to a lot of projects. There was a year where he was saying no to everything, and I think that would be hard for another person if you weren't the life partner and you were like, it's equally valuable to me where this person is in their life, that they need to semi-retire, or they need to like pull back and focus on the collection, or they need to heal or whatever, as it is to stick to maybe these business goals that I have. And I can Rubik's Cube them around based off that. And it's not like there's no resentment there. There's no like, well, how does that line up with my plan and my goals? Because they're so joined. I think that it would be hard for somebody else to follow the whimsical whims of a true artist if they weren't like really invested in that person's growth as like an artist and a life partner too,
Yeah, definitely. It keeps you on the hamster wheel otherwise, in a way that sometimes just doesn't jive with life, I mean, I don't care who you are. At some point, you're going to need a break from everything that you're doing. You need to have the right people in place to do that. But if their incentive is, if their incentive is like just trying to make more and more money, more and more commissions, and maybe that's not like, the best thing for them to feel or hear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would never be like,
Totally.
Fern, we got to do this fireplace. If it leads more from what does Fernando want to do, informs what I have the capacity to maneuver with clients, employees, etc. And,
If you were to give a young designer any piece of advice, both of you, what would you give?
I mean, I'm waiting for you to go first, but
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay.
yeah, go first. And also,
I would
obviously, center it around sales.
Yeah, centered on sales.
I had my whole answer.
Oh, you got it. Okay, well, give both. Give more. Give a sales. Do it. Yeah, say whatever.
Okay, well, I can bridge the sales and what my answer was going to be, which is basically authenticity. because I feel like that is a good anchor in life and business. So don't try to be like anybody else in terms of even when we're talking about pricing or how you talk with clients. Be authentic to yourself. If you're a little bit of a nerd about process, show that side of yourself. If you authentically feel that your work is valued at XYZ, then show up at that and be confident with it, and don't try to lower your prices to be overly competitive. Don't try to arbitrarily raise your prices to be in a place that doesn't like truly fit you either. Have authenticity in what your work is and what your brand is, what your voice is, and who you are as a salesperson and also as a contributor to the industry. And I think that will always resonate, and it will have the most lasting power, more than trying to find the perfect pricing structure compared to your competitors, or the perfect, email etiquette that AI says I should use, and etc. And authenticity all around is what I would strive for and keep coming back to.
Yeah, it's really surprising that so many times a lot of the people that give me feedback, they're just like, "You're just so real," and I think to myself, I'm like, are people just walking around being total phonies all the time? I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, I'm just like, I'm a guy being
I don't get it
himself.
either. People tell me that too. They're like, "Oh, but I trust you because you're authentic," and I'm like,
Right.
"Huh?"
But
That's why
I
you guys are successful, because
Mhm.
it is something that is becoming, I think, more of a rarity,
Hmm.
even more so, I think, year by year, as people become much more comfortable presenting on camera or
Uh-huh.
digitally. They lose touch with their authentic self. And if you can keep coming back to that, whether you're doing like a studio visit, answering an email, on a podcast, it's going to be
Hmm.
better for your career and for potential people that you want to work with. Exhibit A and B
Yeah.
over here.
And my piece of advice in this case, I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I just want to give you some real world pricing ideas. One, when you're starting out, you need to use the rules of three. Okay. Um, if something costs you $2,000 to fabricate, that piece needs to be around $6,000. And the reason that is because uh, two goes into what's considered overhead. Okay, so you got 2,000 in costs, but you have to consider your overhead, right? So you have to say, well, what is the cost of my studio? What is the cost of running electricity, right? Those types of things. So overhead. So you need to make another $2,000 in overhead. And then, of course, you have to pay yourself, which is the thing that we always squeeze, right? We always say, well, if I'm keeping the lights on, then I'm fine, right? But if you want to figure out a good structure to start off with, you say, well, I spent for, let's even say, even painters, I'm not even going to, artists in general, right? If you're a painter and you're like, well, I don't know, well, how many hours did you spend on it? Well, I spent about 100 hours on this painting, or 50 hours on this painting. Well, what would you like to be paid per hour that you painted? Well, $25. Is that fair? $30 an hour. Well, I'm educated. I have a master's. Well, maybe I should earn $40 an hour. And then you put that number, and then you times that by 3. Okay. And that'll give you kind of a good basis, right? So if you are fabricating a bronze piece that costs you $10,000, and again, the other thing to widely consider is that if you are going to be making a piece with you're going to sell it through a gallery, and a piece costs you $10,000 to fabricate, well, this is where your margins start to get really squeezed, right? So because then it needs to be 30, but then the gallery needs to make a margin, right? So you have to you have to be kind of realistic about how you're thinking about pricing things. But usually, if you're on your own, the rule of three is pretty good way to start until your work has value in the market. And then the market will allow the prices to be more dictated, right? But if you're just off the cuff trying to figure out how to do this, that's always a good way to start. And then secondly is, yeah, making sure that you present yourself according to the work and the level that you want to be at in this industry. And the way that I did it at the beginning was I just looked at famous artists and people that I admired or I thought were running a really good studio, and I studied them. I studied the way that they behave, the way they speak, the way they dress, the way they present. I became a student of the thing that I wanted to be, and then eventually I became that thing. You know, maybe I was an imitator for a long time, but I also don't think that it's too bad to kind of like copy until you become your own person. And especially if you're 20s and 30s and you're still kind of figuring yourself out, that's a good place to kind of start, you know? So yeah, and definitely value yourself, correctly, and, yeah, and everything, and be authentic, like you were saying. So, all
And
right,
if you have
guys.
any
Oh, yeah.
questions about your prices, you could also just DM us. We'll tell you.
Yeah, we'll tell
We
you.
can look at it and be like, exactly what it is.
Yeah, we love doing that. People, I
Yeah,
would love
that's a
looking at
fun
pricing
game
and
for
be like,
us.
that's off. That's no good. Oh, that's too low. Oh, that's too high.
Yeah,
We played that game live at the fair.
exactly.
Yeah, we did.
We got through that
Okay.
without any babes.
With no babes. No
Mhm.
babes. Well, Mika, Rosique, thank you for joining us on this episode of Design Discord, where we talked about sales. It was awesome, and thanks for being open with us, even though, you know, and for everyone who now knows that Mika is my wife. Yeah, we're the dynamic duo behind FMS at this point. So if you see us
It was
out
awesome.
there, say hello. Yeah.
Yes.
And if you enjoyed this episode, give us a like, subscribe, share with a friend, and
Yeah, guys, it's
follow
super
us on
important.
Instagram.
It's super important because honestly, like, we're doing this out of the love of it, but we would at some point love to be able to pay ourselves, or at least just pay for the thing to be done. And those subscribers
Mm.
are super important. And we're just going to try to keep bringing value to you guys. So yeah, subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff really helps.
All right.
Peace.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.